Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Campfire Council podcast. As always, we are excited to be here, and today we are going to be diving into a continuation, a part 2 to our previous episode of Defending the Faith. I know we had some questions and things that we wanted to go further into to answering and dive into a discussion with that. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but if you want to go ahead and take it away.
So, as you saw on our social media and whatnot, there was a lot of snow and in our area, and it was horrible. I mean, obviously, I have stories that I can tell about. I do landscaping, so snow removal is part of that job. So it's a doozy, and we got probably like almost 2 feet of snow here in Wisconsin. So that was not fun. Everything
a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Was that like the biggest snowstorm we've had
In like years.
in years?
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Really?
Wisconsin still snowstorms.
Wisconsin?
Dude, I can't stand when people say
Yeah,
it that
Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin. But yeah, it was pretty awful. Everything was breaking. All of our equipment was failing. I had equipment fail on me. One of my coworkers chopped off the tip of his middle finger because he stuck his hand inside of a snowblower. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Did you guys say anything like crazy? Because like the whole 2 days of the weekend was crazy.
Ooh, so our neighbor, so Joey's, Wes, and I are roommates. We looked out of our back door, and this huge pine tree, it was just fell over onto this fence of the neighbors,
I still didn't see that.
and that was.
Yikes.
And then there was just a bunch of trees down in general. Like that snow was incredibly heavy,
Yeah.
super wet and
Yeah.
heavy, just breaking a lot of
Obliterated.
trees.
Mm-hmm.
Obliterated, yeah. It was crazy. I went to my fiance's parents' house, and they sent a video beforehand, and like just all the trees were cracked. There was one that just completely like toppled over. It's just too much.
Yeah. There are a lot of cars that I saw like driving to work and stuff that were either in ditches and snowbanks.
Mhm.
Like, there's a couple accidents that I drove past like in intersections because like the intersections were so icy that you're trying to brake and your car just like, nah, I'm just gonna keep going. We're just gonna slide, and then like it'd be so slow, but you would just see it happen, and it's like, oh, yikes.
Is this
like,
kind of like the most Wisconsin way to open a podcast?
Wisconsin?
So how about that
Oh,
snow, eh?
Oh, sure,
Oh
boss.
yeah, oh yeah.
That was a big one.
Dude, shoveling it was that was a lot. In the
That
lower
was
back.
backbreaking. Oh yeah.
I've got a funny shoveling
Oh,
story.
yeah,
Yeah, you do.
So
Pull it up.
I don't have a shovel, all right? And my parents even said, like, before this whole snowstorm, they were like, oh, hey, do you think you want to, like, snag one of our shovels? And I said, no, Mom, I don't want that. Always listen to your mom, by the way. They are never wrong. And so, sure enough, 2 feet of snow drops, and the snow services at mine and my fiance's apartment, they weren't there. They weren't clearing it because, I don't know, it just, like, kept snowing. So maybe they were like,
Yeah, go ahead. Complain
Screw
about
it.
snow services not cleaning stuff.
they're
Go
like,
ahead.
yeah, you should have been there. Or
Oh.
your buddy who got his finger chopped off should have come or something. I don't
Is it
know. A little bit
possible?
easier job. And so I was like, I needed to go. And I'm like, I opened the door and there's 2 feet of snow. And I'm like, shoot, I don't have a shovel.
Oh shoot!
And so I turned to my fiance. I'm like, what are we going to do about this? She goes, that's you. I'm like, all right, sweet. So I grabbed a baking sheet and I just started kind of scooping. And it lasted about 4 minutes before I realized that I wasn't making any progress. But yeah, and then like the snow had gotten in front of our garages, and it was kind of like icy too. So I was just like smacking it with the baking sheet, and I bent the pan too. So now we got to get a new one. But I think one of the neighbors just kind of like was pitying me, and she kind of walked up to me. She's like, "Do you want a shovel?" I was like, "Yes, please. I would love a shovel." And so got the
Only
job
you.
done in like 10 minutes after that. But
there you go.
yeah, shout out
So-
to that neighbor.
For all you out there, make sure you have a shovel if you live in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I got one in my car now.
Get a shovel.
Yeah.
Oh, I also ate it the other day too when I was shoveling.
Ooh.
Like so I was walking earlier that day, I had a nice slip. The leg came up. I caught myself, and then I went shoveling, and there was some ice with like a little divot my heel definitely hit that going down. I just feet came up and just smacked myself. And I looked around to see if any neighbors saw. We're in the clear though. No one saw.
Okay,
so.
good. Never happened.
Yeah.
Never happened.
We, at my house, because the plows just kept coming through, so we were probably out there shoveling the end of the driveway like every hour. It was horrible because the plows would come back through. They would throw like another like foot of snow at the bottom of the driveway. It's all wet. It's half of it is ice, like that's all the way on the bottom that you like couldn't scoop up yet. It was horrible. It was dreadful.
So basically, just don't live in Wisconsin. You won't have this problem. You won't need to use a cookie sheet or a baking sheet, whatever you said.
I think there's a lot of states that still have a lot of not
Just Wisconsin.
Not like us.
Okay.
It only snows
Just
here.
like us.
Yep.
Oh, and then one more thing quick. Our friend from Bible study, Selena, she called Wes and I over because she lives 3-4 minutes down the
Shout out,
road
Selena.
because her landlord didn't plow the driveway to get to her parking spot, and she has a Honda. So, and it's on like a slant. So Wes and I, we only have one shovel. So we drive over there. Also,
better than
have
none.
more than one shovel. That's important.
Might help.
So we were able to borrow some of her neighbor's shovels, but we spent probably a good at least a half an hour shoveling that
somewhere
heavy
around
snow. And as soon as we finished, the landlord showed up with his plow, and he's like, "Hey, can you guys move your shovels?" We're like,
There's some
all right.
Midwest kindness for you.
so,
right?
Yeah,
so that was fun. So we spent like a half an hour lifting that heavy snow, and then he showed up with the plow. So that kind of sucked.
Nice. Yep. Dude, last year we got not nearly as much snow, but we got a decent amount of snow. I drive a Pontiac Firebird rear-wheel drive. I was going like way too fast, and this guy was just like tailgating me really, really bad. So I was kind of speeding up because I was like, dude, if I have to brake, like, well, first of all, I shouldn't have braked. But all of a sudden I started feeling, little fishtail all of a sudden, and I start, swerving off the side, and I'm like, it's already to that point where it's like, you know how you're not supposed to hit the gas or the brakes or whatever, you're just supposed to kind of like aim it at certain times.
You hit both at the same time.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Lock up
I thought he
everything.
was serious. I was like,
Throw it in
oh,
park.
sure. I would have believed you. Next time I do it, and I swerved off the road and kind of like fell into a ditch, and the dude just kept going. Luckily, I was about like 5 minutes away from my parents' house, so I just like whipped out Crunchyroll, dude, and I started watching some Dragon Ball. It was awesome.
There you go.
It was a time. I was there for like, it took them a long time too, but I was there for like
Wait.
an hour just watching Dragon Ball. And
You didn't realize that was me behind you?
oh, no wonder. No wonder.
Do you have winter tires on your car?
That's a great question. I don't think so.
You should
Probably all
get some
season.
winter tires and
Yeah, they're all season.
put like
Can't go
maybe
wrong.
like a weight in the back or something.
That's what I used
Yeah,
to do.
I have
back of a fucking
now I have now I have the
Put some
recording equipment
sandbags.
and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, adds a little bit of weight. But yeah, I've heard sandbags help.
Yeah.
For a truck.
Oh, really?
Dude, you could put
Yeah.
Why
get
not?
like 4 you could get like 4 baking sheets on the bottom of your tires and
Oh,
just like
dude.
slide. You
There
don't
you
have to
go.
worry
Yeah.
about it.
Exactly.
Some
I like
skis.
it.
Yeah, skis.
Some car
Yeah,
skis.
dude. I'm gonna be flying across. Next time I'll be swerving you off the road, Luke.
No, you won't.
Dude, I got hyped to snow blow the snow.
Really?
I was just in my head. I was like channeling some Warhammer 40K lore. And
Oh my
just
gosh.
like, I'm going to battle with the snow plague, and I'm like shouting in my house
Yeah.
in front of my mom and my sister. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
They're just staring at you like.
They're like, oh my
"Please
gosh,
stop me,
this guy's
though."
nuts.
Yeah.
But it was actually pretty fun. I had fun.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, not stressful at all.
Well,
Really
yeah,
good
when you have
experience.
like one driveway to do, it's different than what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's brutal, but
Yeah.
Coworkers don't have all their
Yeah.
fingers.
yeah, dude, it was. I saw his bone.
That's awesome.
Literally, like he's like, "Oh, we gotta go. I'm like, "We just got here," and he holds up his hand, and I see his bone sticking out of his middle finger. I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we gotta go.
That's awesome.
We gotta go."
Yeesh.
But yeah, don't live in Wisconsin.
Or do.
Or do.
Yeah.
If you want.
That's a great time. I mean,
We're here, so it's pretty
it's a
great.
great discussion.
Toughens you up.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's get into our main topic. So, we kind of wanted to wrap up some somewhat unanswered questions, or just like questions that we didn't think we satisfactorily answered from the last podcast. So one of them is just to go over the problem of evil again. So I think everyone gave great answers to the problem of evil. I think just one of the issues that I noticed from the last podcast is that we need to attack the specific premises of the argument in order for it to be a convincing counter argument. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate what that attack would look like. So the premises of the problem of evil. There's many different forms of the problem of evil, but the basic gist of the popular form of the problem of evil is that if God exists, then he's all good, he's perfectly moral, he's all powerful, and he's all knowing. And if that's the case, then he wouldn't create a world that has evil in it. And usually the justification for that premise, the first premise of the argument, would go something like, if God is all good, then he wouldn't want to create a world with any evil in it. If he's all knowing, he would know ahead of time that the world that he's about to create is going to have evil in it. And if he's all powerful, it's in his ability to not create that world with any evil in it. And so by that justification, God wouldn't create a world with evil. And then the second premise, it's obvious that evil exists, therefore God doesn't exist. Now, a popular response to this argument would be and I think a convincing one would be to say that that justification for the first premise doesn't work, and the burden of proof is still on the atheist who is propounding this argument, because we are not in a position to know that God does not have morally sufficient reasons to allow for there to be a world with evil. If God is all-knowing, he can see the end from the beginning. And he could see that by allowing there to be evil, it creates a greater good. And part of this may be that the greater good in the end is for humans to have free will and for them to freely choose to love and serve God, versus a world in which there's no free will or less free will, in which God or in which those people may not have the ability to even choose to serve God. And then another aspect of that, the atheist could come back and say, well, couldn't God have created a world in which everyone chooses to do good? Because that's a logically possible world. It's logically possible that there's a world in which everyone freely chooses to do good. And I think a good response to this is that it's not logically within God's control to create that world, because he can't determine for people to freely choose to do good. That's not something that's within God's power, because it would be a form of a contradiction to say that somebody was forced to freely choose to do something. That's contradictory. So, it's a complicated argument, and it's a complicated response to the argument. But at its basic level, it basically puts the burden of proof on the atheist to justify that first premise that God and evil are inconsistent with each other. They can't both exist. And in my view, it doesn't work. And then if you couple that with arguments for God's existence that work, I think we're justified in saying God exists, and so the conclusion of the problem of evil is false. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's good to kind of wrap that up, from last week. But I think also when you're talking with other Christians and you're asked that, like, why did God create a world that he knew would have evil in it. I don't know if we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but as we were talking earlier, it's also just that God gives us that free will to choose his way or not. And he makes it very clear he wants us to follow his way. But the fact that we have that temptation, it shows that we can choose for ourselves because he loves us. And as Cliff Nicholas put it, God has pulled himself back and limited his own power because not everything that we do is his like want. You know, so he does limit himself and he allows us to choose for ourselves. And so I think there's power to that. And I think that's also what creates discipline and a strong Christian. Because if everyone was good and everyone was forced to love God, that kind of just takes away like the whole point of like it's your choice. Right. That's a conversation you'd have more so with like another believer, maybe not something you'd bring up with an atheist because they wouldn't believe in God, but yeah.
And I want to give this illustration. William Lane Craig actually uses this this sort of argument, but so do you guys know what chaos theory is?
I've heard of it.
So it's an area of mathematics that basically, I'm probably going to butcher the explanation here, but it's basically studies like very chaotic systems. So like the weather. Why can't we like reliably predict the weather 6 months from now? Like it's very unlikely that we could predict if it's going to be raining 6 months from now, right? We can predict a lot of things. We could predict the exact trajectory of an intercontinental ballistic missile. But why can't we predict the weather like 6 months from now? Well, it turns out the weather is a far more chaotic and complex system than a ballistic missile is. A ballistic missile has a very predictable path. Now, I think a physicist would say if you were to extend the time frame that the missile is traveling, maybe it eventually becomes like a chaotic system. But within our time frame, it's very predictable. So, how does this relate to the problem of evil? God, if he's all-knowing, he does know if it's going to be raining 6 months from now, right? But from our perspective, we can't see it. So if we ask, like, why does God allow for there to be evil? Like, why did God allow for the Holocaust to happen? God could see if it's at least possible that God could see that there's a good reason to allow for the evil, the horrible evil of the Holocaust to happen. If that's even possible, then that first premise of the problem of evil doesn't work. Because the first premise is saying that these are logically inconsistent. It's necessarily the case that evil wouldn't exist if God exists. That's at least for the logical problem of evil. There's another one called the probabilistic problem of evil, but that one would basically say it's unlikely that God exists if evil exists. We don't have to get into that one today, but I thought that was a really good analogy that like in a chaotic system, it's possible that a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in the world could cause a hurricane like a month later. That's one of the conclusions of chaos theory. From our perspective, we have no idea if that butterfly is going to cause anything significant. But from God's perspective, he knows. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on the problem of evil?
I just had it's interesting when just seeing how evil in the world kind of, it just shows what it's like to not be with God. Because, I mean, we experienced, like you mentioned last episode in the podcast, Milo, about all the tragic things that happen with, like, war, crimes, all those things. It's like, kind of like you said too, Brandon, is God, he limited his power in a way to give us that free will. And that's us experiencing what life is without God, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, because with God we have perfect unity, like with Adam and Eve back in the garden. In the beginning, in Genesis, they had perfect unity with Christ, and there wasn't that evil. And then, you know, they went ahead, took from the tree of knowledge of evil, and then they sinned, and then sin entered the world. And that's God kind of saying, I gave you that free choice, and unfortunately, along with those choices are going to be a whole bunch of other things that you aren't going to like, and that's going to be permanently engraved while we live on this earth.
Right.
So
No.
it's not necessarily evil for God to do that, right? By allowing sin
Right.
to enter because of the choice two people made.
Right. If God has a morally sufficient reason for
Mhm.
it, then by definition it wouldn't be evil for him to do that. Noah, got any thoughts?
I'll be totally honest. Like, I've been really trying to, like, cling on to what everybody has been saying, and my brain has been going in 75 million different places.
Okay.
So I've
Just
been
pick one.
catching snippets, but I haven't been, like, fully in tune with what everybody has been saying. So it may sound like I'm a horrible person for saying that, but trust me, I've been trying to listen. I think it's the nerds. The nerds are getting to my
The
head.
nerds. Look at those nerds.
But no, I think kind of what everybody was saying, kind of would summarize what I would say. Like, just more, I think what you just said on God's purpose and plan
Yeah.
for everything, and so he knows, since he's omnipresent, he's already in the future, and so he knows what's going to happen no matter what. And so, like, it doesn't, like, for us to live in this state of mind, I guess, of like, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen, blah blah blah, like, you know, is my actions going to cause this or whatever, like, you know, for us to, I guess, think in that way, that could be very destructive. But God has a purpose for everything and for our free will, so that for our free will we can come to know him and grow in deep relationship and then spend eternity with him someday.
Perfect.
Yeah. Also, when you said greater good, the first thing that I think about, dude.
The greater good, I
is
am your wife.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
I wanted to say it so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm your
yeah. Yep.
I'm the greatest good
You ever gonna get.
Oh, what was that other question you had for us?
Like to move on to the next question?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
I was going to throw in there a cool thing too about, I mean, it's not like Christ gave us the option to obey him or disobey him and then just left us all by ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because that'd be pretty messed up, and at least in my mind thinking about that, like Christ being like, okay, here's your option. You failed. See you later. Good luck. Like he's here with us every step of the way, as long as we're willing to accept that help. And like you're saying, Noah, he's omnipresent, where he's in the future and he's in the present at the same time. Like he knows, which is just crazy to think about. I can't wrap my head around that. But even though he knows we're going to keep failing, he's still rooting for us. And he still wants us to be in a relationship with him. I think that's really cool, that even though we do sin and we do fail, he's still here with us, helping us get through everything that we have to face in life.
Absolutely.
And I think that should be the main argument for Christ. Like, we shouldn't believe in Jesus because it's like, oh, this has to be the last possible explanation. Like, dude, Jesus, he just loves us, dude. Like, more than we'll ever feel loved by any other human, more than we could ever love any other human. It's just this beautiful bond. Like, when you feel Christ close to you, it's just, you just can't explain it. You're just like, I'm so sorry, God, that I failed, but I know that you still want me to be in heaven with you. Like, you're always forgiving me as long as I ask for it. It's like, that should be the main thing that we like pound into this, is it's just such a beautiful love that we have. That, I mean, think about somebody who's done wrong to you. Now imagine them doing that same wrong to you like 100 times, and then on top of that doing like 100 more wrongs to you. We'd be pretty upset about that, and we probably would want to pass on. But like, it's just incredible. Like, time and time again, Jesus will be like come to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for you.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
There's a beautiful song that goes with that. It's called Storehouse or Storehouses.
I don't think I know that
but
one.
it's really good, and it's that reflection of like when we mess up, no matter what, we have that ability to go to someone who still loves us, even when we're not deserving of love. He still loves us and still calls us his friend, and still wants us to just, fall into his arms. And the lyrics of the song, they say like, I'll go to the storehouse of mercy. I'll go. And so like, that's just explaining like, there's this, like in human terms, there's this huge, vast building of just overflowing mercy that at any point we can just turn and just go, I need to go there. And God will go, come on in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not, I have to clean myself up or whatever. Like, I can just go there and I can just sit with God and just be like, man, I'm sorry. Like, I made a mistake. I messed up. I said this thing to this person, like, and it's eating me up now and blah, blah, blah. Like, and God's like, okay, just sit with me. Like, I still love you. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Like, just be here. I'm just glad you're here.
I
Like,
think that's hard
amazing.
for people to like conceptualize something they can't physically see, like
Yeah.
kind
Right.
of like what we're talking about. So it's like for like if you're in a scenario where you need comfort and you can't find that comfort in anything else, whether it's human or with anything, and then you sit there, you close your eyes, and you cry out to God, like in your head, like you just sitting there by closing your eyes and just trying that, can go a long ways. Like if you can't, if you struggle to understand something that's there that you can't see, like a ghost, like next to you, like try to like, in a way, like close your eyes and just visualize it in your head that someone there is next to you, and just say his name out loud, and that alone can bring you comfort.
Absolutely.
Like, I feel like everyone here has been in a point in their life where like they've just felt so awful and nothing else has worked, like not talking about it, like with friends or family, like that didn't really give you the full comfort that you needed.
Yeah.
But like what it came down to was, like a meditative state of, it's not even a meditative state, it's just you coming before God and just giving your situation up to God. I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah.
God saw that the world was going to have evil in it,
Mm-hmm.
but he planned ahead, and he planned out a way to save the world. Yeah. And it's funny how like all of our stories basically have that kind of a like save the world sort of storyline, and at the heart of the gospel, it's like the greatest expression of what we're all looking for in a story.
That's
I'm
real quick.
I'm gonna
Okay.
move on.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you can move on.
Okay.
Literally at that point, I was gonna bring that up in the book.
Okay, all right, go ahead,
But-
just do it.
But yeah, just that aspect of like, how every single story that has been written that we're looking for, that's like, oh, it's such a good story, that feel good, of the hero saving like the girl or whatever, or saving the city, and like it's just this huge like, you know, hurrah at the end that like, yeah, like the story is finished, it's good, it's done. Like all of those stories, we love that because it reflects the best story ever.
Yeah.
And that is the salvation story.
It reflects reality.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the world that we actually live in.
Yeah.
It does one of these.
Yep.
Tons of those.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next question here. So another question that kind of came up, Wes actually brought up the question of why did God create the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And I think that at the like more abstract version of that question is, why did God create us able to be tempted, or even create things that had the possibility of tempting us? Brandon?
So when we were talking about this, kind of like what I had said, that it kind of goes off of that we get to choose what we want to do, and God shows his love for us by saying, like, I'm not forcing myself down your throat. Like, you don't have to believe in me, and you can give into the world. But evil is not necessary, because that wasn't the intention. In the Garden of Eden, it was perfect. Everything was perfect. It was just God and man and woman. And so I don't think that means that it's necessary. I guess, yeah, because...
Yeah, that's kind of going into the next question of like if evil is necessary or not.
Oh, whoops.
For like a meaningful life. But like it is related to this question. Luke, I actually do want to go to you because you've been reading Job, and this is very, very applicable to that story where, you know, God, it seems like he allows evil to occur in people's lives. You know, he allowed for Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and all the evil that came from that. But is there a purpose to it? Is there a purpose to allowing it?
That's a good question. I am reading through Job, and I will say Job is an excellent book for anyone who hasn't read Job, or if you have read it before, go back and read it again. It's very complex and layered, but to kind of summarize the book, God describes Job as a blameless and righteous man, I believe it is. And he ends up having a conversation with Satan, and Satan's pretty much prowling the earth looking for someone to test, I believe. And God actually recommends Job for Satan to test. And pretty much Job is a super wealthy man with a lot of livestock. He has 7 sons, I think, and 2 or 3 daughters, a wife, just really wealthy, really well off, in good relationship with God. And God says he gives Satan permission to test Job, and he ends up losing all of his livestock. All of his sons and daughters die, and it goes into Job, actually, which is incredible, which blows my mind, is Job goes right away into praising God. I don't remember exactly what he says, but I know I believe it's at the end of chapter 1, or beginning of chapter 2, but I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if I'd have the strength to go ahead and praise God right away after losing my entire family, everything that you own. But he praises God, but he ends up talking to some of his friends, and they're debating and talking about like why these things are happening to him. And it is super complex, but Job ended up asking God, like, what have I done to deserve this in a way? Like, what sins have I committed that I deserve this to happen? And he ends up questioning and debating, like, is it better to never have existed or to face these evils that he faced before? He never curses God. He never wishes that he was dead, but he does question, if it was better to never exist instead of having to face the evils that he did. But kind of losing my train of thought. But what was your question again, Milo? You had.
Well, I guess you could compare like Job being tempted for him to be angry. Like he easily could have, cursed God and like really taken a different route, and a completely different route. So like he was tempted in a way to be angry at God because he had all the reason to, his whole family being taken away and like everything he owned. So I feel like that kind of correlates together of like him being tempted.
That reminds me too. It shows pretty much Satan's trying to prove to God that even one of your strongest followers, someone who, as God said, is like a blameless, uprighteous man, like he's gonna fail. He's gonna curse you. He's gonna fall away from you, but he doesn't. And it also shows, like, it's an example that our faith shouldn't be determined on circumstances. Like, our faith should not just be 100% all glory to God when everything's going right. Like, we have the job we want, we have the family, everyone that close to you is healthy, right? Life is good. That's when it's super easy to give glory and to praise God. It's when we're in the lowest of lows, when your health is failing, when you didn't get that job or you lost that job, when you get that bad news, whatever it is, it's like, are we still willing to follow Christ, not curse him, and praise him at the end of the day? And I think that's also something that goes along with the story of Job is whether we're in the high or low, God should still be getting all the glory and all the praise.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly hard to do, especially with Job's extreme. I mean, we're going to go through things. I don't know if we're ever going to go through something like that, but that's just a great example of like circumstances should not matter when it comes to our faith in Christ.
Yeah.
God allows for temptation to help us grow. I haven't gotten to the end of Job yet, but
Same.
I just thinking back to what I've heard from like sermons and stuff. I think Job doesn't. He comes to the conclusion that God has a purpose, but he's just not going to fully understand it. God is God, and Job is just a man, and we're never going to fully understand why God allows these things to happen to us, but we can understand that God has a purpose, and part of that purpose is to grow us in our faith.
Yeah, I think that when we overcome those temptations, that's what builds discipline. And when we place accountability into our lives, that shows that we want to be better. It shows that we're taking action to be better. And so I think that like the road of a Christian is not easy. You are promised to be insulted and persecuted by the world. It is not a simple task to be a strong, firm believer in Christ. But that is the beauty of it, is that at the end of this life, you get to be joined with the one you've been fighting for, and he's going to be there with open arms. And we do have to take an account for all of our sins, but in the end, we'll be in heaven. And I do think that God will be very proud of us for overcoming those temptations that he did allow to be in this world. So, yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely been at a point in life where it's like I felt away from God. Kind of like where God has taken something out of my life, and I immediately turned to anger and let that fester, and that's like what was the divide between my relationship with God, and like life without God was even worse. Like how you were just saying, like being a Christian is hard, but not being a Christian was like, it felt even harder because like I still had like a feeling in the back of my head of like, yes, God still exists, and like it was always there, and it like will always be. But when you choose to be separate from God in your heart because you're so angry with whatever circumstance, it's like that can really, really derive you from him, and don't suggest it.
Yeah.
Wise
Yeah.
words from Joey's.
Yeah.
Because then what we fill that void with
Yeah,
is
exactly.
finite,
Mm-hmm.
you know, unfulfilling things. For some, it's drinking. For some, depending on the circumstance, it might be pornography. For others, like drugs, like it could be anything, gambling. I don't know. And those are all very earthly, and you're just going to keep wanting more. You just want to keep wanting more and more and more. But when you give yourself to Christ and you feel that love, it is just a fulfilling love because the work is already done. Like, you're already forgiven, and you don't have to do anything. You just have to believe it, and salvation is yours.
And the something too to think about as well is, and it's super exciting, like in the book of Job too, like that example is, even though like God gives Satan pretty much like free reign over Job and his situation right there, which is pretty scary. And Satan does his worst on him, but Christ still is victorious in that story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he still comes out with the big W.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super encouraging too, because literally think like the prince.
Never do that again.
Dubs
Brandon.
all day. Sorry, I'm not
Cut
really
it.
a gamer. I that's what you guys do when you get a dub, right?
Nope.
I don't think
I see Wes do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like the dad that's like trying to be cool. He's like, oh,
Yeah,
you get a dub,
it's-
son?
Watch, we're gonna get up to heaven. Jesus is gonna be up there like, you got
Yeah.
the dub, you're in.
Right. I'm holding it.
Yeah, but like the prince of evil, Satan, had his free reign over Job and his situation with his life, and Job was still giving praise to God, and Christ still won in that situation. And then overall, like, God being omnipresent, knowing what's happened from the very beginning of time to the very end, he knows even in this world with evil, he's still going to be victorious over that evil. Like, the light's going to beat the dark.
Yeah.
And that's something for us to have hope in and be excited about. So,
Yeah.
Let's go on to our next question here. So it's very related. Is the existence of evil necessary for us to have a meaningful life? So listening back on the previous podcast, for those that didn't watch it or don't remember, I was playing the role of the atheist, and Luke was making this point, and I think that the point that Luke was really making, or really trying to make, was we need to have the ability to do evil in order for life to have meaning. If we were just robots that didn't have the ability to either choose to do good or choose to do evil, life would be meaningless. We'd just be atoms floating around, and it really wouldn't be a life that's worth living. I 100% agree with that. I think the way that I had been interpreting it, partially, and also how it was worded, is that it sounded like evil, the existence of evil, is necessary for life to have meaning. And Brandon had a really good response to this. What about heaven? Like, what is heaven in that case? Because in heaven, there won't be any sin, there won't be any evil. If evil is necessary for us to have a meaningful life, is heaven then a meaningless existence? And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. Does anyone want to take this, Wes? You want anything? Okay. Yeah, I think from like the Christian side of it, we are asking for that life. We're asking for a world where we no longer have sin. And I still believe that we have free will. It's just like a completely different reality. It's like a completely different dimension. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, so I guess I would just say that like us as Christians, we're asking, like, that's the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where God cures our disease called sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in that life, we don't have sin.
And it's not like I don't think it's that God could just like come in and cure our sickness of sin now, and without us living life.
Yeah.
I think God uses our life here on earth to sanctify us and perfect us, so that we will be perfected through Jesus in heaven.
Yeah.
I think that's the idea of sanctification.
Yeah.
Noah, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it goes into, is the existence of evil necessary for a meaningful life, I think it helps put into the perspective of us wanting heaven. So kind of like what you were saying is like, we live in this life and we mess up, we fall short, we do things that we don't want to do, and there's evil and there's wickedness and there's death and all these other things that it rips our heart apart. And I think it is because of that, and because our free will, going back to also the temptation aspect, it wants us to, or it puts us into the greater mindset and longing of, I want something better than this. I don't want life just as it is. I know there's something better, and I want that, and I need to figure it out, and I need to, achieve that. And the way that happens is through, this life, through the struggle of trying to become better, become more like Christ, have that sanctification journey, so that we are focusing ourselves on Christ. And then therefore, when we reach heaven, God looks at us and says, well done, my good and faithful servant. It's not, oh, fire and brimstone for you, buddy. You weren't really taking up the call to live a life that reflects me, or live a life that wants to turn from the things that I don't enjoy or whatever. Like, it's in that we see that there is something better, and that we gravitate towards that. We gravitate towards that comfort of wanting to live a better life.
Joey.
Yeah. Just going off that, like let's say we're all wrong, right? And that there's no God, there's no heaven. Just looking at Jesus's life is like the way he lived his life so selflessly is like that alone is like a good way to live. Even if you don't buy into all of this, and like it's not adding up, it doesn't make sense to you. Like if you were to just try your best to live the way that he lived, like that's just a good guide to life. So that's another like, not like reason. Well, I guess it is a good reason to follow.
And you can't really argue that it wasn't a good way to live. I mean, I guess you could, but you gotta recognize that it was.
Yeah, exactly. Like 100% selfless. Literally cared for everyone. Never once talked down to anybody.
Wes, you got any?
Kind of like on the point of, is heaven like pointless or whatever? I kind of like picture it as like working out at the gym or whatever. Like, is that like, because like heaven's the end goal for us down here, right? And like the gym, you're working towards either being healthy or getting to whatever your goal is in the gym, like getting stronger or whatever.
Massive.
Right. So God put us.
Getting
Yeah, you want to get huge. So God put us down here to grow in Him, get stronger in Him mentally, and it's the same thing as like the gym or whatever. And then so our end goal, He wants us to get ready to actually get up there to heaven and actually like be.
I like that.
Be with Him.
Love the workout analogy. It's awesome.
That's actually really good, and that also brings up the aspect too of where we're also preparing for Jesus to return someday. It's not even like just about us wanting to live a good life because then we'll be in heaven someday because we centered our life on Christ and we're a good servant and all that. It's also, while we're here, there still is that to come of Jesus coming back to earth and, ushering in that new heaven and new earth, because that still is a very real possibility. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen, whenever. We don't know. But, like, that's another way, too. Like, we have to live, according to his word down here as well to help usher in that new heaven and welcome him at, like, the analogy of, like, the church is the bride. Like, we're welcoming God to claim his bride back. Mm-hmm. And so, like, we should be wanting to live to, like, just be taken in that way, to be in full relationship with him.
Related to what you're saying, and this also relates to the problem of evil in general. One way that I kind of think about this is like Doctor Strange in Infinity War.
Oh, dude,
where
I love these analogies.
He is, he is using the time stone, and he's going through all the different possibilities, and he sees like the possibility where what happens, Thanos wins, was the only way for Thanos to eventually lose in Endgame, right? It could be that God saw the end from the beginning, and he saw that a world in which he allowed there to be free will and for the people to do evil was the only world in which the eventual new creation could actually be actualized, where people would have free will but truly would choose to do good, because it's because of the strength of Jesus's love. We come to such an understanding of how much God loves us that we just freely choose to do good, and there's no more evil. Like that it could be that the new heaven and the new earth was only possible by allowing for there to be a world with the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or Anakin having to turn to Darth Vader,
right,
in order to eventually destroy the Sith.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Thanks. How many movies can we tie in?
Thanks.
What about
keep it going?
What about two? I don't know if this goes back to the previous question or the same one, but kind of like Wesley, you're saying with the gym. Like when you go to the gym, you're working for something. Like we're working towards becoming closer to Christ and eternal life with him in heaven. And I guess another analogy is like, imagine if we're back in high school and you sit down for class and the teacher's like, hey, here you guys go. Here's all A's for you. Right? Like that'd be sweet at first, right? Like awesome.
No summer school.
No summer school. Exactly.
Screw geometry.
But now imagine going through every single grade, every single class, every single day, receiving those A's, right? No work, no studying, no homework. To us as kids, like that's awesome. But what happens when you get out of school, right? You no longer, like you didn't get that education that might help you, well, one, to graduate, two, probably like get a job that you might want. You're going to have educational barriers of just not being in touch with reality in general. Or it could be the situation where you have the students where you have to work, you have to study to get those grades in order to achieve, to graduate, to go on to life with that. And I kind of picture that with the choice that God gives us. Like when we truly want something, we have to work something. It's something's going on here.
I held it in for so long.
I tried, dude. I tried.
Brandon spilled a little bit of water.
Yeah, I kind of like splashed back up on my face. Dude.
I saw you too,
just
and then I
flipped.
couldn't.
Sorry. I saw you in the corner of my eye too. I'm like, focus.
I tried so hard.
We're
Sorry,
definitely
Luke.
leaving that in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oop,
Clip
sorry.
it.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just it shows. Even like buying your first car, right? You could get the nice gift of a car, which is awesome, or you have that option where you have to work, you have to put in the hours at your job to buy that car. And it might not be the nicest car, but you're gonna appreciate that car so much more than the car that you were just given to, because you understand the value of work and time and sacrifice. And that's what the Christian life is. It's work, it's time, it's sacrifice, and it's not easy. It's not going to be like the nicest car, because the Christian life is not the prettiest.
Yeah.
It can get quite ugly, actually. But
Quite.
when you truly want a relationship with God, you're going to be willing to work for it, and it's 100% worth it. 100%.
100.
All right, guys. So that's going to conclude part 1, where we were talking and strategizing about the podcast today, and we wanted to wrap up unanswered questions from the last podcast. So now I want to go into some like common questions that skeptics might bring up in conversation that we didn't bring up in the last podcast. So the first one is just a backstory on this. We as Christians, we believe that God created the universe. In Genesis, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So Christianity is a belief. It's a philosophy that says that the universe didn't always exist. It came into existence a finite time ago, and the ultimate cause of the universe and all of us is God. God's the creator of the universe. So the question that a skeptic might bring up is, if God created the universe, then who created God? So what do we think about this? How would we answer it?
So when we were kind of talking about this, the first thing that I said is, if you don't believe in God, you take God out of the picture, and it's all just spontaneous. It's just a cosmologic accident. Science still to this day, I mean, what do they believe? It's like the Earth or whatever is 2 million or billion or
Like
godzillion years
I
old.
think it's
Quintillion.
4 billion.
Yeah,
I
something
think
like
we'll
that.
go with quintillion. I like it.
You don't like Godzillion?
Nope.
Dang it. There's still no explanation for how it came to be, because per the law of the second law of thermodynamics, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. So like
First law of thermodynamics is that energy.
energy,
can't be-
yeah.
Or is it the zero?
So I guess both.
I think it's the first law.
Well, first and second, yeah, energy and matter or mass or
We're
whatever.
basically scientists.
Yeah,
Let's be
pretty
real.
much.
No, I think it's the first law of but
Geologist over there.
yes.
Yeah.
So-
There's no. Sorry. Yeah.
No, keep going.
Yeah. There's no explanation for how it came to be, and I feel like scientifically you can't. But we talked about this is assuming that in our time, in our technology, we can't prove it. But let's just say that in the future, science could prove it. Everything needs a cause, and God is that cause. So the universe coming into existence, those laws that I was talking about, they need a creator. They need something to have caused them. And so by that explanation then, and I know you can go into more detail, that's kind of as far
I would
as I'll
say
take it,
everything that begins to exist needs a cause. So that would be the universe and everything in it.
Mhm.
But if we're saying that everything needs a cause, God is a thing. So would God also need
I
a
see.
cause in that case?
I see.
So I think that's where the confusion that this question kind of comes from. It's God is not a thing that came into existence a finite time ago,
Yep.
right? God's not something that God is as conceived by Christianity. God is the ground of all existence. He is the cause of everything that exists outside of himself.
Mhm.
So in that case, God is a necessary being and not a created thing by definition. Now, does that mean that God actually exists? That remains to be seen. We would need to go over arguments for God's existence. But if God exists, then he doesn't have a cause. He's not a caused thing.
Yeah, and I think you need a being that's outside of those laws that almost do like make sense. You know, he's not out of logic, but he is beyond science because he's beyond time itself. Like this is I like to describe it like this. When you were teaching me about the cosmological.
Kalam cosmological.
Yeah. Like this circle would be like everything that we need or have, like everything, and it's technically expanding, but we'll just say that this is it. to have something outside of this, so this is laws of physics, this is everything that we know, like everything that science can prove, something outside of that then can defy laws of time, of space, of, reality, power, soul, mind.
And when we say outside of
Infinity
it, we're
War,
not saying there's an outer space outside of the universe.
It's
that
nothing.
God,
But it's
we're
like-
saying God is not dependent on the universe.
Yeah.
God is the thing that caused and holds the universe in existence. So
Yeah.
he's logically prior to the universe. In that sense, he's outside of it.
Yeah.
On this podcast, we solve shower thoughts.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right?
That's
I mean,
a
that'd
deep
be
shower.
much.
Wow, your
Yeah.
shower thoughts are. I just think like, man, what does rice feel on my socks? I feel like on my
Milo.
socks. Those are my
Watch the
shower
last
thoughts.
pod. Milo's got a strange.
Shout out.
All right, guys. Do you have any other thoughts on this one?
I was gonna add in, like, we as Christians believe that God is the creator, and it kind of contradicts God being the creator if someone else created God.
Right.
Even if you think about it, like, I guess in a more simple way, like, you can't really be, at least the way I think about it, yeah, if you're the creator, you're the creator.
The creator of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are creators of things, but we have causes. So like, you have to define the creator in like a certain way. Yeah. I want to go on to the next one. I'm going to you, Noah.
Oh, okay.
So, this would be okay. I kind of like prefacing these questions with a little bit of a backstory, so we kind of know what the context is. But I think we live in a society today where we've seen amazing miracles from science. Like the amount of technology that we live in today is unbelievable. Imagine trying to describe what the world looks like to somebody from 1000 AD or 1500 AD or even 1800 or 1900. The rate of progression is insane. Like if you were to compare the world of 1000 BC to 0 AD, 1,000-year difference. Does it look that different? There's a lot more people at that time, and the Roman Empire exists, but there's no powered equipment, right? There's no computers. There's nothing like that. Compare the world of 1800 to the world of 2024. That's a 224-year difference, right? That's a huge difference. And the world of 1800 was very advanced compared to the most of human history. So we live in a world that's dominated by the effects of science. We see it all around us. And I think something that the worldview that we're kind of taught in school and in society in general is that science is rational. Science is rationality. Religion is the world of mysticism, and it doesn't have anything to do with logic or rationality. So if you wanted to live as a rational person that doesn't get deceived by irrational thoughts, then you would just trust what science can tell you. And it seems based on this worldview, it seems like science has disproven religion. So I guess the question would be, hasn't science disproven the Bible?
Quick answer, no. But
All right,
we'll,
moving on.
That was so easy.
No, but you touched on it in what you were saying, and it's that science explains the natural world, so everything that we can see, everything that we can touch, smell, taste, like everything that is normal to us that we experience all the time. Science can explain almost all of it. But then there's an aspect that science can't explain certain things, or some things that people consider it to be like unnatural or paranormal or whatever. That's where faith, that's where spirituality, that's where Christianity comes in. Having faith in God and in religion is what helps to explain other aspects of this world, and that is why we have so many people believing in this book that was written thousands of years ago by many different authors, and like it's still going today, and like science could probably maybe explain somehow in some way that, but to a logical person you would think, wow, that's insane. Like 2,000 years this book is still going. It hasn't changed really at all. Like, it's still the same thing as it was before. Same accounts, same words, like all of that. And so there's a level to science explaining everything that we can see in front of us. But then there's a level that faith in God and Christianity can explain a level that is far beyond that. And yeah.
Could I ask?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, go
What
ahead.
it says, hasn't science disproven the Bible? What does that mean? Like, what has science disproved?
Right. So, it hasn't. So, take like claims of the Bible, for example. Like, let's say, Moses parting the Red Sea.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like based on the laws of physics.
Yeah.
That's not possible. That's not something
Gotcha.
that can happen. You can go try it. You could go to the Red Sea and try it, but it's not going to happen, right? You would need all sorts of
Here we go.
scientific equipment, right, in order to make that happen. But one person doing it with a staff, that's not something that living in the belly living in the belly of a whale, that's not possible by science. Someone rising from the dead, that's not possible. Like once your metabolic reactions cease, it's no longer possible to revive somebody, right?
Yeah.
So
I got you.
in that sense, those are all scientific. Those are scientifically verifiable statements. Doesn't that disprove the claims of the Bible?
What, just by saying that, because science says this, everything that happened based off of eyewitness accounts is wrong?
Yeah, and we could say that like there's a lot of things that people claim from eyewitness accounts. There's a lot of.
What about the Mandela effect?
There's Mandela effect. There's all sorts of cults and stuff. There's a lot of things that people claim, but the only thing that we can really trust is science, right? And so where I would kind of attack this argument, I think it's similar to where you're going, but we have to ask ourselves, what are the kinds of claims that science can even investigate in the first place? Right. What ultimately is science? Science is a method for studying the way things normally are in the physical world. And one of the concepts that we utilize in science is natural law. Force equals mass times acceleration, right? It's a great example of a natural law. These are laws that govern the universe, and we utilize math and observation, empirical observation, in order to come up with laws about how the universe normally works. Let me ask you this. Is it within the purview of science to investigate things that could possibly exist outside of the laws of physics?
Are you asking Sorry,
I was
rephrase
gonna
that
say,
question one
repito, por
more
favor.
time.
Yeah. So, if let's put it this way, like, is it possible that that things exist outside of our universe, or not within the laws of that govern our universe? Is it
Yeah.
possible? Is it that's that logically possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think a lot of atheists would even agree with this, that it's logically possible if they understand what logically possible means. To say something is logically possible is just to say there's no inherent contradiction. A married bachelor is something that's not logically possible, right? A square circle, a statement that's true and false. These are things that are not logically possible, right? So at its most basic level, the idea that supernatural things exist is logically possible. But because science is the study of the natural world and the things that exist within our universe, it's outside of the ability of science to investigate certain things if those things exist. Like, could you scientifically disprove the existence of God? It's hard to even imagine how you, like, could you test it in a lab? Could
No.
you like
'Cause,
design a
yeah, it's something that you
microscope,
can't
or
see,
could you,
taste, touch,
like,
smell.
could the Hubble Space Telescope find out if God exists or not?
Can I add in something really quick too? One thing, like, God doesn't limit himself to science. Like, he's not something that we can, like you said, go in a lab or come up with an equation or have an answer for everything. And if we're thinking like that, I don't think that's a very smart way to approach it, because God is literally like the creator of the universe. Like, he's so much more than science. To even to limit him to that, like, we're never going to fully understand and wrap our heads around that. And I think it's probably kind of crazy too, and kind of cool that it's not, he's bigger than that. He's so much more, that we can't just have scientists giving all the answers for that. Like, we have to search and seek, and that's where faith comes in too. Because where's the faith if we have a simple 2 + 2 = 4?
Yeah.
But there is
Yeah.
also then trying to argue and debate to have those logical questions of trying to prove why God exists, and it can be challenging.
I was about to say, I think that would go pretty well into the
Just
the
move
last
on.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to say anything on that? But
Wes, got anything to add?
But one thing I want to just add
Okay.
for clarity. You brought up a good point about just how describing what science does. Science is, at its fundamental level, is observational. So you were saying, like, you can't see or touch or smell God, right? That's an important point, because the things that science deals with are the things that we can observe. The things that we can observe with our senses.
Like
Ultimately,
physics?
it does come down to our senses. There's things that we can't see, like infrared light, X-rays, or viruses, for example. But think about the chain of observation. We design like a scanning electron microscope, right? It can detect the existence of the virus. But ultimately, in order for the scientist to know that there's a virus there, he has to observe it, right? So at its fundamental level, science is observational. It's empirical. If there are things that are not observable in principle, then it's outside of science, right? If God exists and he created the universe and wrote the laws of physics, it seems possible that he could cause the Red Sea to split, or allow Jonah to live inside the belly of a whale. The real problem with the question is that the person is assuming that there is no God. And if you assume that there is no God, then these things are like miraculous things,
Right.
or the claims of the Bible are not possible.
yeah.
But that's begging the question we have to ask:
Yeah.
does God actually exist? So yeah, let's go into this next one here. Is faith just belief without evidence? Do we just believe in the Bible, because for no reason, or
Because our parents told us
yeah,
to.
because our parents told us, or because it makes us feel good? Like, is there no what is faith?
I think if we believed just solely 100% on faith with no like proof or anything else to go along with that, I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do. I think with anything in general, if you're just 100% no confirmation, you don't question it, you don't look for answers. I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do, because we have the Bible, which is going to be a huge thing with giving us. It's a book of life, pretty much. Like it's helping us walk through life. And I mean, I can't imagine following this faith without like having the Bible. Would that still be like 100% faith without having the Bible? Do you think?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think I kind of understand what you're saying. I think it would be a completely different reality that we'd live in.
Yeah, because having the Bible
is an evidence.
Yeah,
it's a human written book with
Yeah.
accounts of history of people, real people,
that is stayed
things that happen. So
accurate.
if you remove the Bible and you're solely just 100% out of faith following Christ, I think that'd be impossible. Almost. I mean,
I will say, when it comes into that, like there are accounts of many different people in cultures from around the world that they've encountered Christ in some other way that does not does not involve a Bible. So again, this kind of goes back, like God can work through things that are, beyond the laws of science. But how can a person, right, who has never had contact with the outside world or the modern world, has never had contact with the Bible, has never had contact with a missionary, yet they have that belief in their heart, even though they've never even heard of or read about Jesus Christ, they have this belief in their heart through a dream or whatever it may be that Jesus Christ is God. That's happened. That's a real thing. People attest to that, and there is that line of, having that faith of like people said, yeah, this happened to me in my dream, or I had a supernatural like experience with God. He made it clear to me, and that is why I believe. Like they've never been to a church, never read the Bible, they don't have all these other things, and yet it's just it's God speaking to them. And yeah.
Is faith just belief without evidence? So to Noah's point, the evidence in those cases to those people is their direct experience of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's like ultimately, I think all of our faith is based in our encounter with God, like even with the Bible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why do we believe in the Bible to begin with? Like, we never talked to Moses, we never saw him, right? We weren't there to see Jesus, right? I believe the reason why we believe in the Bible is because of our inner experience of God when we read the Bible. Now, the atheist response to this would be, couldn't that just be like your emotions? Couldn't that just be your feelings that are deceiving you, right? And I think that there's, like Brandon has brought this point up before, that everything that we believe is based on our deep intuitions just about the world. Like, how do we know that other people exist? How do we know
we're not in a simulation?
Right.
That's what I like to go to. Like, you can't prove that right now.
Right. No, you can't prove that you're not in a simulation, that the outside world doesn't exist. But does that mean we don't know?
Right.
Like if that means we don't know, then we ultimately don't know anything.
Yeah.
And if you could come to the conclusion that you don't know anything, you know that you don't know anything, which is self-defeating.
Wild.
So I don't think that the skeptical view holds water. There has to be things that we just know at a very basic level.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that our belief in God is just that kind of properly basic belief.
Yeah.
Then you can add to that other evidences like historical analysis of the Bible. Could add arguments for God's existence. You can add additional like what, even when we're kids, you know, we see the effect that belief in God has had on our parents, and that's a good evidence for us when we're kids. As we get older, we start to question things more, and that's where new evidences come in. So that's where I would kind of go with answering that. I don't think faith is belief without evidence. I think faith is a trust in God that is grounded in our experience of him.
Yeah.
And it's embedded in us too. Like God created us to worship him. I think it's almost like that gut feeling too. Like, you know, you can tell something is just truly wrong or false. Like, I know for me, I don't know if you guys experience this, but when you have that feeling that like, even though you have your doubts at times, like you have that gut feeling almost that like this is right, this is true. And I know for me, if I didn't feel like that, or if I didn't know, like I wouldn't want to follow something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we know.
Yeah. I think we do.
I think we do.
I also think we do.
Wes?
I believe.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, if we don't want to bring up anything more, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we were able to do a part 2 to this. I think we were able to get, kind of like you're saying, you'll get to revisit some of the questions that either weren't answered or we could answer it hopefully in a little bit better of a way for those of you listening, and just ways, once again, that we can be confident in defending our faith and learning more about our faith in general and how to answer these questions that people might have, or if you're in a debate, something like that. Just being more confident in your faith. Hopefully we're able to shed some light on that.
To our listeners, we're not professional philosophers, theologians. We're just some bros. We're gym bros that are Christian, and we're interested in learning about our faith and learning about how to share it, and just thinking about deep questions. So look into these things for yourself, and we can just hope that as a podcast we're encouraging to our listeners to explore these questions even deeper, you know, actually consulting pastors and theologians and Christian philosophers.
And we're not always going to be right. Like you're saying, Neil, we're going to be wrong for things that we say. And that's why we have each other to keep each other accountable. That's why we have the Bible. We have Christ to look to as an example. And like you said, we're normal guys going through life that are striving to grow closer to Christ in our faith. And hopefully we can share some things that can help you along with your journey, whether you're curious or you're on that path of Christianity. And hopefully we can go through that journey together. But we're here just to have a fun time, talk about God, be bros, and hang out. But off of that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Campfire Council Podcast.